Good afternoon, everyone. And it's our privilege to have been involved with Arts Insight over the full 6-year period, and delighted to have the opportunity this afternoon to take you through the findings. It's a fascinating research series to be involved in. And I think it's primarily, well, it's a fascinating subject anyway, but it's, as Maureen mentioned, we have the opportunity to review the same questions, the responses to the same questions, both pre and post COVID. And we have seen such a change in relation to so many aspects of people's leisure behaviour in the intervening period. And this survey certainly captures that. It's a comprehensive and full questionnaire. As you see, it goes through arts entertainment, digital arts engagement, getting information about arts events, participating in the arts, reading for pleasure, and then national attitudes to the arts. So within the questionnaire, there's a series of sections that remain on an annual basis, that they're consistently there. And they're the questions we can track the changes over time. But also we have a modular design whereby each year we add in a new topical section to the questionnaire. And this year was about theatre and plays, and the types of plays people have attended in the past 12 months and their motivations for attending those plays. So we'll go through each of the sections in turn. And just to confirm what Toby and Maureen have mentioned, it's a fully nationally representative survey. So we interview 1,000 people in their homes and go through this detailed questionnaire with them. And the survey is strictly controlled, so it is nationally representative. So it gives you a very clear idea about what the nation thinks and how the nation behaves in relation to the arts. So we'll start off with attendance. And to put things in context, we'll first discuss leisure interests and leisure participation amongst the Irish public. And we have a whole series of activities, and we ask people the frequency with which they do them, if they do them at all. And it ranges from spend time with friends and family to attend a book club, everything from eat out at restaurants to visit a public library. So a whole gamut of potential leisure activities. And as you can see, there's quite a clear ranking system. Maybe just concentrate on the weekly plus. So 70% of us regularly, so on at least a weekly basis, spend time with friends and family. 63% of us listen to music. 51% of us on a weekly basis watch on-demand TV, such as Netflix, Disney Plus. 42% visit websites. 28% read books. 35% take part in sport or exercise. So it's it shows on a national level the type of leisure interests that we're active in. Now, the thing is, we can compare this to both last year, but also back in 2019. So let's just compare this year result, the weekly plus, to what it was back pre-COVID. And we can see some very interesting patterns. We're much less likely, by about 10% less likely, to spend time with friends or family on a weekly basis. So we are distinctly less social. Now that's gone up year on year, so it's getting back to where it was, but still, it was 77% of us spent time with friends and family on a weekly basis pre-COVID. Now it's 70. We're also far less likely to watch regular TV channels. It's 55% now. It was 72% on a weekly basis pre-COVID. And we're also far less likely to read magazines. So you can see, in terms of traditional media, the impact it's had. There are other things which have gone up. We're more likely to listen to music. We are, and particularly here, the role of Spotify and digital sources of music is very important. We're more likely to eat out at restaurants. We're more likely to go leisure shopping for clothes. We're more likely to take part in exercise. We're also more likely to play video computer games. But just to say that in terms of leisure interests, there's been quite a lot of fluctuation between pre-COVID and now, short as it is in terms of time span, but there's a lot of things have changed and evolved in terms of our leisure habits. Now, if we go on to the meat of the survey, which is in the past 12 months, which, if any, of these events have you attended? And let's look at the pattern. So let's just start here on the actual events, and then I'll tell you about what the summary figures are. So 48% of us in the past 12 months have been to the cinema. 20% have seen a rock or popular music gig. 18% have seen street arts, 15% have been to a traditional Irish folk music event, 14% of us have been to a play, 12% to a country music gig, 12% to an art exhibition, 11% to a musical, all the way down to 2% to an opera and 2% to a ballet. So when we aggregate all that together, 72% of us have been to at least one of those art type attendances in the past 12 months. And we can also aggregate them in other ways. 48% of us have been to an event that involves music, and 54% of us have been to an event which are traditionally funded by the Arts Council. So we refer to them as any core arts activities events. And these exclude, as you can see here in the footnote, they exclude films, musical, stand-up comedy, country music, rock or popular music. So when I use this term, any core arts activities, I'm referring to those events that are traditionally funded by the Arts Council. So that's the picture nationally. And you can just see the diversity. Film is dominant, but then you have this mid-tier and then a third tier. But let's see how that varies from pre-COVID and last year. Last year, there has been, it's positive. There have been a series of small increases across so many different art types of art event. Whether it's 3% more for street arts, 3% more for plays, 2% more for event connected with books or writing, and a lot of ones have gone up by 1%. However, also it's 2% more have gone to see an any core arts activity event. So that figure was 52% last year. However, the decline since COVID is still evident. 5% less of us are going to an any core arts activities event. 5% less of us have been to a musical than we were in 2019. 3% less have been to classical music. Now you see it's not focused on any particular type of event. It's more an overall reduction. Now, if we look at that just in terms of the demographics and look at it since the any figure year on year, you can see whereby there's been slight increases by gender and age. Young adults, the very young adults, 16 to 24, 3% more of them went to an event last year. 25 to 34, so it was down 3%. So those are the sort of marginal increases by gender and age. The big difference was that there was a decline in Dublin. 7% less people in Dublin went to an arts event last year, whereas the increase, and this is why there was no increase overall, was exclusively outside Dublin. So there's no difference in terms of the percentage of people who attended an arts event last year. However, that's on a national basis. On a regional basis, there was a big difference. There was a decline in Dublin and an increase outside Dublin. And that is true of any events, but it's also true of traditionally funded Arts Council events. Here, there was an increase in terms of women and also very young adults, but that same divergence in and outside of Dublin was evident. Increase outside Dublin, decrease inside Dublin. Now, of course, this is also a function of availability, and it might have been that 2021, the availability outside Dublin was still recovering post-COVID. Perhaps the availability was much stronger in the past 12 months. But in any event, it's a type of regional pattern for attendance that we don't typically see. Now, in terms of venues attended for arts events, so in which of the following venues have you attended an arts event in the past 12 months? Again, it's dominated by multiplex cinemas. Also, in an Irish context, pub hotels have always been very strong. 36% of us went to an event. 36% of us who attended an event in the past 12 months did so in a pub and a hotel. 26% open air venues, and then it goes down to libraries, 12%, local arts centres, 11%, town halls, 9%. Now, if you look at the pattern, since in year on year, you can see again, a number of the venues have increased in terms of national incidence, whether it be cinemas, particularly pubs and hotels, open air venues, church. You can see that attendance is coming back to life, really. It's bouncing back since COVID. both in terms of the percentages who are going to different types of events, but also in relation to the venues they're attending. So we have down here another aggregate figure, which is any Arts Council funded venue. So that includes Art House Cinema, Concert Hall, Opera House, Local Arts Centre, Art Gallery and Theatre, and that is up 3% year on year. Now, it's still down pre-COVID, because this figure was 43% pre-COVID, but it is up year on year. And the big increase is in relation to women and also those who are 50 years plus, and particularly in terms of social grade. ABC1 is typically middle class or white collar, CT2E is typically blue collar. So year on year, we're seeing a positive dynamic, but we're still not matching the levels of participation and attendance we saw pre-COVID. Now, if we look at this just in terms of festivals and look at national engagement in arts in relation to this forum, we have 39% of us have attended a festival in the past 12 months, and it's particularly apparent for local cultural and arts festivals. So we'd find these for people. These are festivals that are held in your local area. They're often smaller festivals, both indoor and outdoor, might include community festivals, and that's 24%. And then the other types of festivals all have a very similar level of national participation. So 10% of adults went to a large-scale music or cultural festival. 9% went to a dedicated arts festival. That could include the Galway Arts Festival, Dublin Theatre Festival, and so on. 9% went to another cultural festival, whether that be food or heritage, design, science, technology, and so on. And if we look at the demographic pattern in relation to the festival attendance, it shows a very clear demographic bias. So in terms of overall festival attendance, it's much higher amongst younger adults, but that is exclusively a function of younger people being much more likely to go into large-scale music and cultural festivals. But it's also much stronger amongst ABC1s, whether it be large-scale music festivals, dedicated arts festivals, or also local cultural and arts festivals. And the other thing about local cultural and arts festivals is that participation and attendance is much stronger in rural areas. That might surprise you, but it confirms that it's true. Now, that is just going back to what we mentioned at the start, in terms of Maureen's definition of the purpose of the Arts Council, which is more people will enjoy quality arts experiences. When we show that something is peaking, the attendance peaks in one demographic cohort, it means there's a trade-off in the other. So if more middle-class people are attending local cultural and arts festivals, it means that in relative terms, fewer blue-collar people are. So there's an opportunity, a need, an objective and a target to increase participation in something like local cultural and arts festivals, which nationally are very prominent, amongst other demographic cohorts which they're already popular among, which is ABC1s in rural at the moment. Okay, so talking about attendance, one of the things we've noticed over the years, at the chart, the earlier chart where we listed all the different types of arts events, well, when we were analysing that the first year, it became apparent that there was a huge amount of crossover, and that the same people were attending many different types of events, or at least could do. And that drove us to create a segmentation based on the number of different art events that people attend. So we came up with this term about occasionals and regulars and enthusiasts, and so enthusiasts are those Irish adults who attend at least 5 different type of arts events in any given year. So they might go to the cinema, they'll also go to a play, a ballet, an opera, and a talk about architecture. And regulars and occasionals, regulars will attend 2 to 4, and occasionals would attend 1 to 2 different art event types, such as they go to the cinema, but they also might go to a musical. And this is the way it breaks down over time. This year, 29% of people can be termed occasionals. They go to 1 or 2 different types. 20% can be defined as regulars, and 14% can be defined as enthusiasts. So they're 34% of all Irish adults, either enthusiasts or regulars. And as you can see, it's declined since COVID. There were more regulars and enthusiasts pre-COVID. Then there was the big dip. So it has bounced back and increased year on year, but they're still not at the level of what they previously were. Well, what's the point about that? So what? The point is that they regulars and enthusiasts account for a disproportionate amount of ticket sales, and that they're the people who are most likely to buy tickets for arts events. So they might only be 34% of the population, but they account for last year 76% of all attendances. Back pre-COVID, they were 41% of the population, but they accounted for 82% of all attendances. Now, so they're vital. Now, it's in a way, it's about, there are two different perspectives on this. So commercially, when you're running an arts organization or you're running an arts venue and your ticket sales are vital, then regulars and enthusiasts among your customers are absolutely vital. However, there's also then the remit of the Arts Council is that more people experience quality arts. So here what we'd like to see is that the none figure goes down. And that this is 28% of the population who didn't go to any arts events at all in the past 12 months. We'd also like to expand beyond this, that 10% of people only went to the movies. So we'd like, we'd like to expand that so they go into the occasionals group, so they also see a play or a musical or whatever, a stand-up comedy gig, whatever it might be. However, on a commercial basis, regulars and enthusiasts are absolutely vital, and because they're the people who go to more different types of events, but they also, in terms of their attendance, go to arts events more frequently. Now, if we look at then attendances, just to get an idea of what we're looking at in the change pre-COVID, this is the percentage of Irish people who attended an arts event in each of the 3 years we're looking at. So 72% did it this year, 72% did it last year, and 76% did it pre-COVID. And you can go, well, not much change here. There's only a drop of 4%. Wow. However, when we look at the number of events they're going to a year, the frequency, then the impact really starts to, it takes on a different shape. 76% of us went pre-COVID, and on average, we were going to 7 different events every year. It went down to 72% and 5.4 in last year, and now it's coming back up. It's still 72%, but the people who are going, which is the vast majority, are going to more events, 5.8. Now, what that actually means in terms of attendance is when you combine both of these, you can get a huge impact. So for instance, what we saw, let's take attendances were 100% pre-COVID, 2019. When these two impacts are taken together, it means that attendances dropped by 28% last year. Now this year, it's going back up. It's 6% rise in attendances. Now in a normal business setting, commercial setting, that would be fantastic. 6% growth year on year. Wonderful. However, we're also conscious of that it still constitutes a 20% fall from 2019. So in terms of the environment out there, the relative environment there, it's still hugely challenging, albeit that the green shoot is that attendances are up year on year. And that's for all attendances. Now, if we look at it for the events that are traditionally funded by the Arts Council, we see exactly the same pattern. In terms of the incidence of people who are going, it's broadly similar. Okay, the decline was a bit more sharp than we saw for any arts events, but it was the frequency again. Pre-COVID, it was 8. Now it's 6.8. So pre-COVID, we look at what the change was. Last year, we were down 31% pre-COVID. However, year on year, there's been this 10% rise. So we're back here just around the 80 mark. However, the 80 mark means we're still 20% down on pre-COVID. So it's a challenge. And in terms of where the big drop is, in relation to people, different types of people. You can see there that the overall drop is 22%, and for arts goers it's 23%. But those people who go occasionally, you know, who go to one or two different arts events, or 2 or 3 different arts events every year, they're going exactly the same amount of frequency as they did pre-COVID. Absolutely no difference. The drop-off since COVID is due to regulars and enthusiasts going more frequently. Now, if you're running an arts business, that means that your core customer group, the fall off in attendance, is absolutely directly related to your core audience going less frequently. So in terms of trying to recover your attendance levels back to what they were pre-COVID, the data would suggest that you focus your strongest efforts on your existing core customers and try and get them to go back to the frequency of attendances they had before COVID. Now, we're going to show you what makes it even trickier is that these people probably don't realize that they're attending less often than they did pre-COVID. Now, admittedly, with the Arts Council, they have a separate objective. They want people to go to the arts more frequently as well, of course, but they also want to attract new people to go to the arts. And we're also going to be looking at that. And here it is. In terms of new recruits, so people who attended a type of event for the first time in 2022, it's actually 31%. Now it's down year on year, but this is a type of figure that typically fluctuates. But it does show that the percentage of people who are willing to try out a new art form or type of art event for the first time is very evident. Now, in terms of actual numbers, it's very big at a national level. It's basically saying that 1 in 3 of us went to some type of different event in the past 12 months. And of course, this is swollen up by the younger adults. But you can see it's sort of a small amount of people, a small percentage of people wanting to go to all different types of events. There's a 1% of people out there who'd love to go try out an event connected with architecture for the first time. 2% of people would love to go to a musical for the first time. 3% to a traditional Irish folk dance for the first time. When you add them all up, it comes to 31%, and it's actually 19% of people would like to go to a traditionally funded Arts Council event that they haven't been to before. And that figure is it fluctuates by age, but it's broadly similar from the mid-teens to the early 20s. So there is an appetite out there nationally to attend a new type of event. It might be small for each event type, but overall, the appetite to try something new in relation to the arts is very much apparent on a national basis. Now, we also ask people about this frequency question about why don't you go more often? Because there is a question in there, would you like to attend more often? And a huge amount of people say yes. And then we say, well, what stops you? And there are a sort of key set of reasons. It's difficult to find the time, 52%. It costs too much, 39%. Limited choice or poor quality of the type of event where I live, 31%. It's too far to travel to, 23%. There's not enough information on what's available, 8%. Now, in terms of year on year, however, we're seeing big changes. This figure of it's difficult to find the time has gone up by 16%, as has limited choice or poor quality of the type of event where I live. That's also gone up 10%. Reasons directly related to COVID hangover. I am still feeling nervous about COVID and public events. That's gone down 10% to the point now where it's practically disappeared. It's only 3% who say they'd like to go more often are saying, well, I'm still nervous about COVID and that's what's holding me back. So we really are dealing with the classic issues around it's difficult to find the time or it costs too much. Now, these are terribly challenging barriers to address. But if it's difficult to find the time, then it does suggest that people would be more open to events that are more localized to them. And where that is naturally changing in terms of where we work, there's more people working from home than working in the city centre any longer in terms of office space. But it also might relate to how we find out about what's close to home. And we're going to get onto that in relation to the information sources for the arts. But it paints the picture of the challenges we need to address in terms of increasing the frequency of people who already attend and getting new people to attend. But I want to also go on to that about it costs too much, because that's a prominent concern. Now, we asked people about to evaluate their most recent art experience, and they gave a score to give it a score of 1 out of 10. And the first was the evaluation was about their overall experience, taking everything into account. And the results here are good. 52% of people give a score of 9 or 10, and you typically only give that kind of score if everything went really well. 42% gave a score of 7 or 8, which means it was good. They enjoyed it, but there was something that could have been improved. And 6% were unhappy. But then there's usually about 1 to 10 of people who are unhappy with broadly any experience. So that's not to be worried about. So the overall score was 8.5 out of 10, which is really good. The value, we then asked them, well, how about the value for money you got? And here we see the scores are less positive. 37% were delighted with the value for money. 37% were happy, but they had some reservation. And just under 20% were actively unhappy. Now, value for money score is always tougher, and people evaluate that on a harder basis. But it is something that we need to be particularly conscious of. And also value for money is when people talk, we ask, how would you rate the overall value for money of attending the event? So when we ask the question, we are focusing on the actual event. However, they may well take into the whole number of costs that were involved in going out, from parking to dinner to drinks, whatever it was. However, they've always answered the question in the same way. So it's interesting for us to review what the previous results were. And here it's not good. So in 2018, in terms of value for money, 50% were delighted, whereas now it's 37%. Even last year, this figure was 41%. Now, seeing value for money go down, the evaluation go down, is not surprising when you're in the middle of a cost of living crisis, a sustained cost of living crisis. But it is something to be mindful of, particularly if your business, if it's very important for your arts business to increase the frequency with which your core customers attend. And if the frequency and value and perceived value for money are often very closely intertwined, as you can imagine. There are no issues around the quality of the experience they're getting. But so if the value for money was related to the product, sorry, I hope you don't mind me referring to it as that, then you would see both of these fall quite heavily in unison. But this one is very similar to what it was in 2019. So it probably has more to do with pricing, although it could well be informed by the bundle of prices they're receiving on a night out. But it's definitely one for us to be conscious of. Okay, if we move on then to the theatre and plays. So this is our topical section for the year, and this is one we're going to focus on. This is the attendance we've looked at for plays over the last few years. So it's 15% pre-COVID, 14% this year, a rise of 3%. Now, in terms of theatre, it's always shown a strong bias. So it's stronger amongst ABC1s. That means it's weaker amongst C2DEs. And it's also stronger amongst regulars and enthusiasts. So in terms of repeat attendance, the opportunity is to increase it amongst your middle-class ABC1 audience. In terms of recruiting new recruits, the opportunity perhaps is more in terms of the blue-collar social grade. But the same pattern is there overall in terms of, while the national incidence might be the same, the frequency with which these people are going has declined, and theatre attendances overall nationally are down around 23% since COVID. However, they're up 17% year on year. So that's super encouraging. So theatre is like many of the events. If you had to say, when would we recover back to the pre-COVID norms? It looks like it's further 2 to 3 years, based on what we're seeing on the data this year. and that the size of the bounce back this year suggests if that rate continues, it'll be another 2 to 3 years. However, there is a caveat with that, in that when you see things bounce back, they often bounce back faster at the start, and then the speed of the bounce, if you like, slows down in the second and third year. So it may be optimistic to be saying 2 to 3 years. However, looking at it half glass full, when you see a rise 17% year on year, that's something, a huge relief and fantastic. Okay, in terms of the types of plays those people have attended in the past 12 months, we often wondered, well, what are they referring to? Is it professional production, or is there a local Amdram, or is it a school play, or is it youth group? So we followed that up and we asked the question this year, and it's about a 60-40% split. 60% are referring to a professional theatre production, 40% to a local amateur drama group. And here the differences are huge by region and area, and naturally a function, no doubt, or informed very heavily by availability. 85% of those who went to a professional theatre production are amongst the Dublin theatre goers, whereas local Amdram are much more popular in rural areas. And then in terms of the professional theatre productions, this is the 58% we saw on the last chart. And we asked them, well, do you think you're attending more often or less often, or the same as you did 5 years ago? Now, I've just shown you a chart where we're looking at theatre attendances being down, 30% more or less since COVID. So it's unquestionable that people are actually attending less often. However, when you ask them, only 13% think this is true. 62% think they're going the same. Actually, 1 in 4 think they're going more often than they did pre-COVID. Well, perhaps they are for that cohort, but this group is actually in reality huge. But when you ask people, only 13% recognize that they're going less often. And what does this mean? Is that, well, our memories and our ability to recall in tangible detail what our behavior was and how it might have changed becomes really faulty over time. That's why in most surveys you concentrate on the past 12 months at most. And then in other surveys you do more frequently, it'll be the past month. We've forgotten how frequently we attended things pre-COVID. Now we know from the data that we're attending far less often, but it's difficult for you to communicate that to people. So a message saying, we need you to attend as often as you did pre-COVID would be met by the reply of, I think we are. So the challenge in getting people to attend more frequently is toughened by the fact that they really don't recognize that their level of attendance has dropped off. So that adds to the challenge. Now, in terms of motivations, and this is focuses on plays, but I'm sure it's analogous to I hope it's analogous on some level to your own area. In terms of reasons people went to professional theatre production, the top one is fun and enjoyment. And we've seen that as the key measure. And it really is, it's always worthwhile every year to remind us that, pure fun and enjoyment is an absolute key reason why we leave the house and go to any type of art event. After that, very similar percentages for to see a specific show or event, or see a specific performer, or to spend time with friends or family. And then in terms of a specific theatre production company, it's 1 in 3. Like going to that type of event, it's 1 in 3. Interested that only 11% said it was to attend a particular venue, e.g. the Abbey, the Gaiety, or my local art centre. It was much more important as a motivation to see either a theatre production company or a particular artist or a particular show. So that's for professional productions. In terms of amateur groups, fun was vital, even more motivating. And then to see a specific performer, artist, or actor, we can presume that that's quite a different meaning than it does over here. Spend time with friends or family adds to my quality of life, like going to that type of event. Ultimately, what we're looking here is broadly similar motivations for either attending a professional or amateur production, and which makes a lot of sense when you think about it. It's just in terms of the pattern, particularly for professional productions, it's interesting where people's focus lies in relation to their key motivations for attending. Okay, so if we've talked about attendance, whether in general, in terms of all arts events, or specifically in terms of plays, a key thing is about where people get their information about arts events and activities. And here's the overall pattern. So how do you usually find out about the arts events and activities you're interested in? And as you go, we've listed all different types of sources. And you can see the pattern here, and you might immediately look at the pattern and go, well, that all makes sense. Television, word of mouth, and online social media are the top three. Local radios next, then general websites, followed by national radio and local and national newspapers. So all's in order and correct, and as it should be. But then because of the investment from the Arts Council year on year, we can see how these results have changed over time. And last year was the first time we saw this, but it's absolutely been validated this year. The changes since COVID, in terms of where we get our information about arts events, have changed hugely. TV is down 8%. So this figure used to be 45% as recently as 2019. It's now 37%. Word of mouth has gone back up, but it's actually higher than it was pre-COVID. And that's because we've seen that increase in attendance this year. Online via social media. Pre-COVID, this figure was 23%. So it was down here. Now it's 36%. Next year, it'll be the highest source. Yeah. And that's via Facebook, Instagram, and so on. Local radio, very similar. Online via websites, up 10%. Local radio is similar. National radio, down 8. National television, down 8. National newspapers, down 7. So huge changes in traditional media. If we look at this all together, there's any television, any radio, any newspaper, any online. Let's look at the changes since COVID. Television, down 9. Radio, down 5. That's because local radio is held up. If it was national radio, it would have been worse. Any newspapers, down 12. Any online, plus 16. So in terms of the shift in relation to information sources since COVID, it's been absolutely seismic. And that ultimately is how we all need to adapt when we're trying to get information to people around attending the arts. It makes it more difficult. It was easier when all we needed to do, not all, but a key thing was to get our information in the ticket in the Irish Times or whatever the equivalent was. And also I'd got back to that motivation that people are saying one of the barriers that are holding them back for attending more events is that they feel they don't have the time, which may also be a proxy for saying they weren't aware of what was on or close to home. Might be one of the reasons. And if we just go into a little deeper around social media, you can see that there are 3 key sources, as you would expect: Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Now, if we look at those since 2019, year on year, Facebook is down, -7. However, it's still the biggest game in town. But look at Instagram. It's up 3% year on year, but it's up 15% pre-COVID. So this huge swing. And if this continues in 2, 3, 4 years time, Instagram will be top. YouTube, very similar. Twitter, still up on where it was pre-COVID, but it's had a dramatic year. It's down 4% year on year. And where you advertise or promote yourself is also dependent on the age group you're looking after. If you're going for those under 25 years of age, the bias should be towards Instagram. 25 to 34, it should be biased towards Facebook, as it should be for 35 years plus. And if you're going for those over 50, it's exclusively Facebook. Now, that's where people are getting their information, but are they satisfied with the information they're getting? And the answer is less than they were, less satisfied than they were. 16% of us are very or fairly satisfied with the information available about the arts events and activities. And that's down pretty much 10% year on year. It's down where it was pre-COVID. Now, it's the pre-COVID figure. We were talking about different types of sources. So those are the old sources. Our satisfaction rate was 73%. Our satisfaction with the new sources is 67%, but it's gone down 9% year on year. And the biggest drop is in relation to very satisfied. This was 21% last year. So we're seeing this declining pattern in relation to satisfaction. And the largest decline in satisfaction is actually amongst the young audience, those who are 16 to 35 years old, and probably are the most savvy in terms of or their expectations in relation to online information. So there are big changes on information sources for the arts, a huge swing away from traditional media to online media, and a retreating level of satisfaction about the information that we're receiving, primarily online, one would have to suppose. Okay, so so that's about attendance in general, attendance at plays, and also the information sources we use to facilitate our attendance. Now we're going to go on to actually participating in the arts across all the different forms that can be. So every year we ask about attendance across multiple different art forms, and then we can aggregate those and confirm what percentage of the Irish population actually participates in the arts. And it's 19% this year. You pretty much say that's the same. Like in a survey, you really are looking for changes of more than 3%, let's say. So it's slightly down, but that's very similar. But what we've seen around participation in the arts is something that it really does fluctuate. In 2018, it was 28%, then went down pre-COVID to 25. Then during COVID, it shot up in that first year of COVID to 34, as we participated a lot online and new types with our newfound free time if we had it. Then it collapsed down to 15% immediately as we came out of COVID. It bounced back in 2022 to 21%, and we thought it would keep going. And it would go back to 25 or 28%, but it stalled at 19%. Still reasonably positive, but it hasn't continued the increase we've seen in other measures. Now that 19%, when we look at it, it shows a very strong demographic pattern. Participation is higher amongst women. It's still apparent amongst men, but it is higher amongst women. It's absolutely higher amongst the young adults. 1 in 3 of those aged 16 to 24 tend to do some form of art participation. And I appreciate that's facilitated by the opportunities that are out there, and many of them are targeted at that age group. The big change happens after the age, when you move from 25 to 34, then participation doesn't half, but gets close to it. And then after that, it comes into the mid-teens. In relation to participation, it's stronger in Dublin and it's stronger ABC1. That means if you're looking at it from a national point of view, the opportunities to grow arts participation are particularly outside of Dublin amongst C2DEs. And this is where the change has been since pre-COVID. So the figure here, practically all groups are attending or participating less frequently or less often or less at all than they did pre-COVID. Men, women, all the different age groups apart from one. 16 to 24-year-olds, 5% more of those are participating on an annual basis than they did pre-COVID. Other than that, we see a drop off, whether it be by region or whether it be by social grade. Now, just to confirm, just when we look at this group, the 16 to 24-year-olds, there was a worrying pattern we noticed last year in terms of they were declining in attendance and participation in the immediate period, let's say following COVID. But thankfully, we've seen a bounce back in that this year. So if we just look at 4% more of that age group are attending any arts events, 4% more are attending arts events traditionally funded by the Arts Council, and 6% more are participating in the arts. So we are thankfully seeing the younger age groups beginning to engage more strongly with the arts, which is very encouraging. Also, we're seeing a huge percentage of people trying out arts participation for the first time. And this was something, we added this question for the first time last year, and we didn't make too much of an emphasis on it because it was basically saying that 47% of those people who participate in an arts event are participating, or an art form, are participating in that form for the first time. And we wonder, well, could that really be right? But it's been completely validated this year. Actually, it's stronger this year. Just over half of all the people who are participating are doing so in a new type of format or form. And what this is saying is probably that there is a super amount of dynamism in the whole sector of arts participation. That people are, quite simply, huge amounts of people are trying new things. Some will stay, but also there's a strong suggestion that a lot of people will drop out and try something else. And in marketing, that's classically referred to as a sector that exhibits a considerable amount of churn. And it's very difficult to run a business in a sector that's characterized by a lot of churn, because you're continually trying to recruit new people, which is very expensive. In terms of a business, it's much more profitable. It's not easier, but it's more profitable to retain the customers you already have and enhance their frequency. So what this is saying is that it's a very demanding area to run an arts enterprise in. Also, it could be suggesting that the satisfaction people have with the service they receive when they're participating in the arts doesn't meet their expectations. And of course, that's a function of two things: the quality of what is delivered, but also the expectations people had when they try the new activity. And also, it seems very similar by age. Like, it's a huge amount of trialing new activities for the younger age groups, but then it's still very apparent across the older age groups. But it's something that it's really a pattern we're noticing in relation to arts participation, that as a sector, in terms of the people who are doing it, not doing it, and people who are switching, is in enormous flux. And that seems to be a characteristic of participation in the arts. And it's also further affirmed then by this figure. You have 36% of people would like to participate more in the arts of all adults. And that's 74% current participants and 27% non-participants. So they'd like to be involved in something else or doing what they're doing more often. And in terms of what's holding them back for doing this, because this is terribly important for the Arts Council in terms of recruiting new people, 58% say it's difficult to find the time, and 27% say there's a limited choice or poor quality of this type of activity where I live. So again, this might go back to word of mouth, but also informing people of what is actually available nearby. And finally, in terms of arts participation, one more area we go into on an annual basis is reading for pleasure. So typically every year we've said, have you read any of the following, or asked, have you read any of the following in the past 12 months? And it's work of fiction, biography, non-fiction, related to the arts, or other non-fiction or poetry. And 61% of Irish adults have read at least one of these types of literature in the past 12 months. And it's stronger amongst women, and it's stronger ABC1s. And it's also very strong amongst 16 to 24 years. In fact, there's been a huge rise in reading among 16 to 24 years in the past 12 months. And chatting to the colleagues in the Arts Council, one of the key drivers we see for that is the way TikTok in particular is promoting literature on its channel, social media channel. So that is, we've certainly, the data we're seeing this year is affirming that is having a big impact. Other than that, the opportunity to grow is if you're in this area, your key customer base are middle-class women. If you're looking to grow reading nationally, then the target is naturally more male, and amongst other social grades, and also the mature age groups. And if we look at what's happening here, it's the reading is broadly stable year on year, but it is showing another, in terms of the various different types of literature, but it is showing another rise, 5% year on year, in terms of the percentage of Irish adults who have read for pleasure. But it's another category related to the arts where there has been a decline since pre-COVID, which is, again, is striking. But like so much else we're seeing in the survey this year, we're seeing this bounce back year on year. And then in terms of frequency of reading for pleasure, so again, analogous to how many tickets you buy when you're and how frequently you buy tickets. How frequently do you read? Well, we're seeing positive trends year on year, albeit again declines since COVID. So 42% of people who read fiction did so on a weekly basis last year. It's gone up to 44. For poetry, it was 32, gone up to 37. Biography, 27, 29. Non-fiction related to the arts, 34, going up to 44 on a weekly basis. So in terms of frequency of reading for pleasure, we're also seeing that increase. So positive movements year on year for reading, whether it's the numbers of adults who are reading the various different genres or the frequency with which they read them. Okay, the final section we'll look at before we conclude is in relation to the attitudes to the arts. And every year we've presented a whole series of attitudes, potential attitudes to people in the survey and asked them the extent to which they agree with them. And the attitude, we've maintained a lot of consistency. There's been some that we've amended and adapted as we've gone through. But as you can see, the attitudes can range from cultural value. So arts education in schools is as important as science and education. So you're asked the extent to which you agree with that. The arts play an important and valuable role in Irish society, and Ireland is a creative nation. And then in relation to the theme of diversity, we say the arts from different cultures give us an insight into the lives of people from different cultures. There are equal opportunities for everyone living in Ireland to attend and participate in the arts. And then in terms of quality, we ask the quality of professional arts presented in Ireland are on a par with those you would experience in any European country. And then there's also economic value, social value, personal well-being, and arts transaction. So in terms of social value, we ask, the arts locally help give my country or region a distinctive identity, and involvement in the arts make me feel a stronger connection to where I live. So let's look at what the results are on a national basis this year. So these are all the statements, and then we record the extent to which nationally we agree or disagree with those statements. And as you can see, that overall, the national sentiment towards the arts is unequivocally positive. Just look at the amount agreeing. So 41% are strongly agreeing that Ireland is a creative nation and 48% agree. And in terms of the dissenting voice, it is marginal all the way through. So for instance, only 8% of us disagree that the quality of professional arts presented in Ireland are on a par with those you would experience in any European country. 24% disagree that the arts play a significant part in my life, albeit 50% agree with that. So overall, there is positivity towards the art on a national level. There's no question about it. Now, there is another way you can look at this, and that's the ratio between strongly agree and agree, and that there is a big difference in the way people answer surveys and how they feel about something if they say agree or if they say strongly agree. The strongly agree response typically has a considerably greater amount of emotion behind it. Much more likely to be passionately in favor of the arts. And what you see in relation to our perspective on arts nationally is this consistent pattern where the agree figure is almost invariably much higher than the strongly agree figure. It's not always the case, but it's such a clear and consistent pattern in terms of the arts. And what it's saying is that we're a positive nation in terms of the arts, but we stop short, I would think well short, of being passionate about the arts. And it seems that overall sentiment seems to be evident irrespective of what question or what attitude we test in relation to the arts. We're always supportive while stopping short of being avidly, enthusiastically, or passionately supportive. And that seems to be the national picture. And it's been consistently the national picture for 6 years. So positive, but not passionate. And if you look at it like this is where we summarize that. You can see the basic pattern here. Strongly agree is always, it's always considerably less than the agree figure. However, the summary agree figure is always very strong. And indeed, in terms of overall agreement, we're exactly where we were pre-COVID. 76% of us agreeing. This is where we disaggregate all the statements, agreeing in general, and 73% agreeing in general this year. However, we have seen a further dilution of that avid or passionate agreement this year. Now, it has fluctuated over time, but the only time our attitudes to the arts really declined was when we went into COVID, because we can say that we were far more passionately engaged with other things back then. But then it bounced back, and our attitudes to arts were equally positive last year. Now, broadly speaking, the positivity remains, but again, it's the engagement has diluted somewhat, and the strongly agree figure has gone down from 31 to 26. So let's look at the statements just in terms of strongly agree in two ways. First, demographically. So is there huge variations in terms of the type of people who strongly agree generally with attitudes to the arts? And the answer is not really. It's identical by gender. It's practically identical by age. There is a difference by social grade. ABC ones are much more likely to be passionate about the arts. There's also a difference by region. Dubliners are much more likely to be passionate about the arts. And urban and rural, really no difference at all that you can talk about. But broadly speaking, I would say that this national picture is very consistent across all the different demographic groups. There's no, I was thinking, I always had the hypothesis that it would be stronger amongst women and it would be stronger amongst the younger age groups. Neither is true on a statistical basis to a significant degree. The other thing we can do is actually look at all the individual statements and see, well, which ones have declined this year and is there a pattern? And if we look at this, they're practically, in terms of strongly agree, there's been a decline in practically all attitudinal statements related to the arts. Often they're small. And again, remember, the overall sentiment towards the arts in Ireland amongst Irish adults is unquestionably positive. But also there's a different, it would help if there were more passionate people out there, because also passionate people are more likely to attend more events and try out new events. So in terms of attitudes and behaviors, there's almost, we also notice that enthusiasts and regulars are much more likely to be passionate about the arts, for example. But if we look at the ones that have really declined year on year, I'll just read them out to you. The arts from different cultures give us an insight into the lives of people from different cultures. That's down 7 year on year. As much importance should be given to providing arts amenities as is given to providing sports amenities. That's down 6. The arts help us express and define what it means to be Irish. That's down 8. The arts locally help give my country or region a distinctive identity. That's down 7. Involvement in the arts makes me feel a stronger connection to where I live. That's down 7. And there are equal opportunities for everyone living in Ireland to attend and participate in the arts. That's down 6. So these are a broad set of attitudes, but if we look at the ones that have declined the most year on year, these criteria, a common theme across those criteria often seems to reference around cultural identity. Now that's a difficult one to pick apart, just looking at the numbers, and it probably would require further review and investigation. Well, a number of them, the arts helps express and define what it means to be Irish. The arts locally help give my county or region a distinctive identity. And others besides have seen the biggest decline year on year. It may be something that almost naturally bounces back, and it was just a function of what we went to see and what was available this year. But it's something we're going to monitor year on year. Okay, thank you very much for review or for staying with me this year. And what I'd like to do as a final chart now is just to summarize everything for you in a one-pager as best we can. And it's a very broad presentation, so we're just going to offer you this one sheet of key learnings as a reference point, really. So we'll go from top to bottom and left to right. So in terms of art attendances, we're up year on year. We can estimate all arts attendances as being up 6% year on year. However, we're still down 20% on pre-COVID. I probably don't need to tell you that at all. Why did the decline? It's because the people who go most frequently are going less frequently than they did. It's all a function of frequency. The percentage of Irish adults who are going to the arts is broadly stable. It's largely the same as it was pre-COVID. It's the frequency at which we go. When we look at plays, I think it's very instructive. 14% of all adults attended a play in 2023. That means it's very comparable to pre-COVID, but we're down 20%. And in terms of what we go to see, that there's probably a 60-40 split between professional plays and local amateur dramatics. The thing about plays, though, is that when we ask people about, we know we're down 20%. When we ask people about whether they're attending less often, they said no. I'm attending the same. So it's just to say that the people who are attending less often, it's highly likely that they don't realize that. Third point would be a large majority of adults, 74%, would like to attend arts events more often. And how encouraging is that? Both in terms of whether it's increasing frequency of your existing company or customers or recruiting new ones. Lack of time remains the primary barrier and is up 16% since last year, peaking among those aged 35 to 49 years. Now, there's a general contextual point there in terms of time, and it relates to our adaptation since COVID. Our expectation, what we expected to happen post-COVID, was that there would be a new normal. And one of the features of the new normal would be that it was characterized by a better work-life balance, facilitated by working from home and a whole series of other changes, and also a moral or a value reset post-COVID. That hasn't materialized. People talk generally about their disappointment in that the expectations they had of the new normal didn't materialize. And they are as frustrated and as often resentful about the demands on the work-life balance as they were pre-COVID. So again, we can go back to the theatre point, in that we won't have a good, accurate memory of how we divvied up our time pre-COVID. And it's probably very different now than it was. However, in terms of how we assess it, how we manage work, how we balance our life, we are as negative about it as we were back in 2019. So even if functionally, actually, we have more time, we don't think so. Or else whatever opportunities we had to create more time, we haven't been able to take them for any number of reasons. So that idea of lack of time is something that is a hugely emotive thing for people at the moment, and that we seem to have, in many respects, in terms of our life, sped back to a speed of life that seems to us to be terribly similar and just as frustrating as it was pre-COVID. And we resent it all the more because we were hoping for something very different. The second barrier in relation to getting people to attend more often is cost. That's the one they mention. And here we have to be very conscious of something else, in that what came hot on the heels of post-COVID was a cost of living issues. And however we define value for money from attending an arts event, whether it's just down to the ticket price or whether it's a multi-category evaluation based on all the costs we had that evening, our perceived value for money is going down. And that's a real threat. It's a threat in terms of word of mouth, positive word of mouth, because when people give positive, that I went to see a great production, but I felt it cost too much. And it's also a real threat to getting people to attend with greater frequency, which is absolutely the key thing we need to do to return to pre-COVID levels of attendance. In terms of information sources, we have confirmed the huge change since pre-COVID. The post-COVID movement towards digital information sources and away from traditional media has continued in the past 12 months. However, we're not happy. Only 15% of adults are very satisfied with the availability of information about arts events and activities. And then the rise in online in terms of social media continues on a pace. Facebook is down, but it's still very important. And the extent to which you engage with Instagram is also dependent on the age profile of your audience. In terms of participation then, 19% of adults have participated in the arts in the past 12 months. The overall decline since COVID is a function of minor decreases across practically all forms of participation. Slightly more than half of arts participants attended a new activity in 2023. This high level of trialing new activities is consistent with that high churn characteristic I mentioned, the rate at which customers start and stop activity. And then to finish with, just to confirm what we reviewed there in terms of national attitudes. Following a post-COVID bounce, strongly positive attitudes towards the arts have retreated year on year. Interestingly, in terms of that strong or passionate positivity, it's very even by age, it's even by gender. It does peak though in relation to social grade and region. And then significant year-on-year declines are evident in relation to multiple criteria. And the most common theme around those criteria seems to reference cultural identity. So I appreciate I've taken you through a lot, but I hope that was helpful.